December 13, 1944. American soldier John Jacobs descends into the hold of a Japanese cargo ship. 749 other men are crammed in with him, into a space the size of a living room. The hatch slams shut. The temperature climbs to 110 degrees. Within an hour, the air runs out. Men start losing their minds from thirst, licking urine off the floor. 24 hours later, 150 men lie dead beneath the feet of the living. Then the unthinkable happens. American bombers attack the ship. Our own planes bombing our own men. John survives. But this is only the first ship. There are 2 more coming. Of 1,619 prisoners of war, only 425 will make it out alive. John Jacobs endured a hell that broke 74% of the men around him. How did one American soldier survive where thousands fell? What kept him going when men turned into animals, tearing at each other's throats for a drop of water, losing their sanity? This is a story about what a human being can endure when he has something worth breathing for. Every word is documented fact. Every death is real. You're about to discover what happens to a man when hell becomes his home for 47 days. December 13th, 1944, 7:15, Manila Bay, Philippine Islands. John M. Jacobs stands in the suffocating darkness of the Oryoku Maru's cargo hold, pressed against 1,619 other American prisoners of war. The ship lurches beneath his feet. Outside, American dive bombers circle, searching for enemy vessels. Inside, men are already dying. This story is based on sworn testimonies, military records, National Archives documentation, survivor accounts, and declassified wartime reports compiled in American POWs on Japanese Ships, National Archives 2003. The year is 1944, and the Philippine Islands stand on the precipice of liberation. American forces under General Douglas MacArthur have returned, their warships closing the noose around Japanese-occupied territories. In Manila, Japanese commanders face a dire choice: what to do with the thousands of Allied prisoners of war held in camps throughout the islands. Balabid prison in Manila has become a hellhole of starvation and disease. Within its stone walls, American, British, Australian, and Dutch prisoners exist on rations of contaminated rice and watery soup. The Japanese High Command knows liberation is imminent. They know the Americans are coming. And they know what these prisoners have witnessed: the Bataan Death March, the construction of railways with slave labor, the systematic brutality of the camp system. The decision is made. The prisoners must be moved to Japan. They will travel by sea, packed into cargo vessels never designed for human transport. The Japanese Navy designates these ships for prisoner transfer, but they will not mark them with red crosses or any identification. To Allied forces searching the waters, they will appear as legitimate military targets. John M. Jacobs has already survived 3 years of captivity. Captured during the fall of the Philippines in 1942, he has endured the death march from Bataan, the brutal labor details, the tropical diseases, the beatings, the starvation. He has watched friends die from dysentery, malaria, beriberi, and simple despair. He has worked the airfield at Lasong, dragging fuel drums in the scorching heat while guards beat stragglers with bamboo poles. Now, in December 1944, he stands among the 1,619 prisoners selected for transport. They do not know their destination. They do not know the name of the ship that will carry them. They only know that something terrible is about to begin. The Oryoku Maru sits at anchor in Manila Bay, a 7,362-ton passenger cargo vessel built in 1938. Once, it carried civilians on peaceful voyages. Now, its holds have been stripped and converted into prison cells. No ventilation system has been installed. No water supply exists in the cargo spaces. No sanitary facilities have been provided. The Japanese Navy has requisitioned it for one purpose: to move prisoners from the Philippines to Japan as quickly and cheaply as possible. On the morning of December 13th, 1944, the prisoners begin boarding. They carry what few possessions they have managed to keep: a canteen, a photograph, a spoon fashioned from scrap metal. They shuffle up the gangplank under the watchful eyes of guards who shout and strike those who move too slowly. John Jacobs descends into the forward hold. The ladder drops into absolute darkness. As his eyes adjust, he sees the space. A cargo hold perhaps 40 feet long and 30 feet wide, with a ceiling barely 7 feet high. Into this space, the guards will pack 750 men. The loading continues for hours. More men descend the ladder. More bodies press into the darkness. The temperature rises with each new prisoner. The air grows thick and humid, heavy with the smell of sweat and fear. By evening, when the hatches finally close, 750 men occupy the forward hold. Another 600 fill the aft hold. The remaining prisoners are packed into the small holds between. Total capacity of the Oryoku Maru, approximately 1,619 prisoners of war, plus Japanese guards, crew, and civilian passengers quartered in the upper decks. In the forward hold, John Jacobs finds he cannot lie down. He cannot sit without his knees pressing against another man's back. He can only stand or squat in the suffocating darkness, waiting for whatever comes next. The ship's engines rumble to life. The Oryoku Maru begins to move, joining a convoy heading northwest toward Formosa and ultimately Japan. In the holds below, the prisoners begin their descent into a hell that will make the previous 3 years of captivity seem merciful by comparison. This is their story. Every name is real. Every date is documented. Every horror described in these pages actually happened. December 13th, 1944, 2000. The Oryoku Maru moves through Manila Bay in complete darkness. Blackout conditions prevail. No lights show from the convoy. Japanese officers on the bridge maintain radio silence, aware that American submarines patrol these waters. In the forward hold, the temperature has climbed above 100 degrees Fahrenheit. The body heat of 750 men in an enclosed space creates a greenhouse effect. The steel hull, baked by the tropical sun all day, radiates heat inward. The darkness is absolute, except for thin beams of light filtering through the battened-down hatches above. John Jacobs squats with his back against the steel hull. The metal burns through his thin prison uniform. Around him, men gasp for air. The oxygen level in the sealed hold drops steadily as 750 pairs of lungs consume it. Some men begin hyperventilating, which only accelerates their oxygen consumption. Surgeon Commander Thomas Hayes, a Navy doctor captured at Corregidor, moves through the crowd as best he can. He has no medical supplies, no instruments, nothing but his training and experience. He checks on the weakest prisoners, those already suffering from malaria, dysentery, or beriberi. In his later testimony to Naval Intelligence, recorded in January 1945, Hayes estimates that by midnight of the first night, approximately 30 men in the forward hold are already showing signs of severe distress. The thirst begins almost immediately. The Japanese have provided no water to the holds. Men have only what remains in their canteens from the prison. Some drank their water supply during the afternoon loading, expecting more to come. Now they realize their mistake. By 2200, men begin calling up to the guards for water. The requests are ignored. The calling becomes shouting. The shouting becomes screaming. The guards respond by threatening to fire down into the hold. The screaming continues. Commander Frank Bridget, the senior Allied officer in the forward hold, attempts to maintain order. He organizes the men into a system. Those strong enough to stand rotate with those who need to sit. They work out a schedule for the single bucket provided as a latrine. In his sworn statement given after liberation, Bridget describes the impossibility of maintaining discipline when men are suffocating. At some point after midnight, a guard opens the hatch slightly and lowers a single bucket of water. It contains perhaps 3 gallons. For 750 men. Those nearest the hatch surge forward. The bucket tips and spills. Men fight to lick the wet deck. Jacobs watches from his position against the hull. He does not move. He understands that the energy expenditure of fighting for water will cost him more than the water would provide. The first death occurs around 02 o'clock on December 14. A prisoner collapses and does not rise. Hayes fights his way through the crowd to check the body. No pulse, no respiration. The cause of death? Heat exhaustion, dehydration, and suffocation. The body cannot be removed. There is no way to move it through the packed mass of men. It remains where it fell, and the men nearby shift as far from it as the space allows. Throughout the night, the temperature in the hold never drops below 95 degrees. The humidity approaches 100%. Men's clothing becomes soaked with sweat. The deck becomes slippery with perspiration, and worse. The bucket serving as a latrine has overflowed hours ago. Men too weak to reach it simply relieve themselves where they squat. The smell becomes overwhelming, a mixture of sweat, excrement, urine, vomit, and the beginning stench of the dead. Some men vomit from the smell alone, adding to the foulness. Others have been vomiting since the ship began moving, seasick in the darkness. Jacobs closes his eyes and tries to think of anything else. He thinks of home, of cold water from a well, of wind through pine trees, of anything but the suffocating present. Around him, men pray. Some cry, some rage. Some have already retreated into silent shock. By dawn on December 14, according to Hayes' estimates, between 50 and 70 men in the forward hold have died or are dying. The ship has been at sea for less than 12 hours. December 14, 1944, 6:30. Dawn breaks over the Philippine Islands. The Oryoku Maru convoy, consisting of the prison ship and several escorts, has made slow progress through the night. They are still within range of American airfields on Mindoro. The Japanese captain knows this. He knows American planes will be searching for targets. He knows his ship, unmarked and appearing as a standard cargo vessel, looks like every other Japanese transport. He has requested fighter cover. None has been provided. In the forward hold, the first light filtering through the hatch reveals a scene from Dante. Bodies lie everywhere, some dead, most barely alive. Men's faces have turned gray or purple from oxygen deprivation. Their lips are cracked and bleeding. Their tongues are swollen. Some have torn their shirts into strips and chewed them, trying to get moisture from the fabric. Commander Bridget calls up to the guards again, demanding water and medical assistance. A guard appears at the hatch and laughs. According to multiple survivor testimonies recorded by the National Archives, the guard says in broken English, "You die soon. No need water." The guard disappears. The hatch closes again. The temperature begins to rise as the sun climbs higher. At 07:15, the sound of aircraft engines reaches the hold. At first, it's distant, but it grows louder. The prisoners recognize the sound. American planes, probably Navy dive bombers from the carriers now operating in Philippine waters. On deck, Japanese sailors scramble to battle stations. Anti-aircraft guns swing toward the sky. The captain orders evasive maneuvers, but a cargo ship is no match for dive bombers. The first plane begins its attack run. In the hold, the men can hear nothing but the scream of the diving aircraft, and then the roar of engines as it pulls up. A massive explosion rocks the ship. The prisoners are thrown against the bulkheads. A bomb has struck the Oryoku Maru, hitting the aft section near the engine room. Jacobs finds himself on the deck, thrown there by the blast. Around him, men scream. Some have been injured by the impact, thrown against the steel hull with bone-breaking force. Others scream from fear, knowing that the Americans don't realize they're bombing their own men. More planes dive, more bombs fall. Some miss, exploding in the water close enough to shake the ship. Others hit. Each impact sends shock waves through the hull. The steel plates groan and shriek. Rivets pop loose. In the forward hold, water begins seeping through cracks in the hull plating. The attack lasts for approximately 30 minutes. Lieutenant Colonel Ernest Irvin, captured on baton and imprisoned in the forward hold, later testified that the bombing felt like being inside a drum while someone beats it with sledgehammers. The noise is deafening. The impacts are disorienting. Men lose control of their bladders and bowels. Some go temporarily deaf from the concussions. When the planes finally withdraw, the Oryoku Maru is severely damaged. The aft hold has taken a direct hit, killing approximately 150 prisoners instantly. The engine room is flooding. The ship begins to list to port. On the bridge, the captain assesses the situation and makes a decision. They cannot continue to Japan. They must beach the ship and offload the prisoners. The convoy alters course, heading towards Subic Bay approximately 30 miles northwest. The damaged ship limps along, its pumps working continuously to keep water out of the critical spaces. In the forward hold, the prisoners wait, not knowing what's happening, only knowing that their ship has been bombed by their own side and that water is slowly rising from the bilges. By 0800, the water in the forward hold is ankle deep. The prisoners begin to panic. If the ship sinks, the hatches are battened down. They will drown like rats in a trap. Men pound on the hatch, screaming to be let out. The guards ignore them. Commander Hayes moves among the men, trying to keep them calm. He explains that if the ship were truly sinking, it would happen faster. The slow flooding suggests damage control is working. His calm authority helps some of the men regain control. Others are beyond reason, trapped in animal panic. The thirst has become unbearable. Men who would not drink their own urine yesterday now lap it from the deck. Others fight over the bodies of the dead, trying to cut them open to drink the blood. Hayes intervenes where he can, but he is one man in a mob of dying prisoners. Around 10, the ship's movement changes. The engines slow. The prisoners feel the hull shuddering beneath them. They hear the sound of the anchor chain running out. The ship has stopped moving. For a moment there is hope. Perhaps they have reached a port. Perhaps they will be let out of this hell. But the hatches remain closed. The guards do not appear. The sun climbs higher, turning the hold into a furnace once again. December 14, 1944, 11 o'clock. The Oryoku Maru sits at anchor in Olongapo Harbor in Subic Bay. The Japanese captain has beached the ship in shallow water, running it aground to prevent it from sinking. On deck, crew members and guards prepare to evacuate. Japanese officers argue about what to do with the prisoners. In the forward hold, the situation has deteriorated beyond human endurance. The temperature has exceeded 110 degrees. The air has become so oxygen-depleted that men can barely breathe. The water on the deck has mixed with excrement, urine, vomit, and blood to create a toxic sludge. Bodies of the dead lie everywhere, and the living can no longer move them. According to testimony from Commander Bridget, this is when the madness begins. A prisoner near the center of the hold starts screaming that the Japs are pumping poison gas into the space. Others take up the cry. Men surge toward the hatch, climbing over the living and dead alike. Those underneath are trampled. Bones break. Men suffocate under the weight of bodies piling on top of them. Jacobs presses himself against the hull, away from the central chaos. He watches men he has known for years transform into animals. A Navy commander fights with an Army private over a position near the hatch, where slightly more air filters down. A Catholic chaplain, a man who has led prayers every Sunday for 3 years, claws at another prisoner's face, trying to push him aside. The guards appear at the hatch, shouting. They fire warning shots into the hold. Men near the top of the pile are hit. Blood spatters down on those below. The wounded fall back into the mass. The shooting stops the surge momentarily, but only momentarily. The survival instinct has overwhelmed all discipline, all civilization, all humanity. Some men begin hallucinating from dehydration and heat stroke. They see water that isn't there. They see home. They see loved ones. A Marine sergeant stands up and calmly announces that his mother is bringing lunch. He walks toward the hull, expecting to walk through it. He strikes the steel, bounces back, tries again. He does this repeatedly until he collapses unconscious. Others lose control of their higher brain functions entirely. They revert to primal behaviors. They urinate on each other to mark territory. They bite and scratch. Some attempt to drink the blood of wounded men. Surgeon Commander Hayes, in his testimony, estimates that by noon on December 14, approximately 30% of the men in the forward hold are no longer mentally competent. The doctors among the prisoners tried desperately to maintain some order. Hayes, along with Army Medical Corps officers, moved through the chaos, attempting to calm the worst cases. They have no sedatives, no medication of any kind. They can only use their voices and their hands, trying to restrain men who have descended into violent madness. Around 12, a Japanese guard appears at the hatch with a water hose. He announces that he will provide water, but only if the prisoners maintain order. Bridget shouts down the command. Everyone must remain calm, must stay back from the hatch, must allow the water to be distributed fairly. For a few moments, discipline reasserts itself. The hose is lowered. Water flows into a bucket. But the bucket is pulled up before it's full. The amount provided? Perhaps 5 gallons. For 750 men, minus the perhaps 150 who have already died. The sight and sound of water triggers another surge. Men fight to reach the hatch. The strongest climb over the weakest. Those who get near the hatch scream up for more water. The guards respond with rifle fire again. More men fall wounded or dead. Lieutenant Colonel Irvin later described this moment as the complete breakdown of military order. Officers could no longer command. Rank meant nothing. Every man fought for himself. The thin veneer of civilization that had held through 3 years of captivity finally shattered in that steel oven. Jacobs remains in his position against the hull. He has seen fighting before, in the prison camps, over food or some petty dispute. But this is different. This is the dissolution of the self. He watches men he respects, men he has admired, reduced to snarling beasts. And he knows that if he enters that chaos, he will become one of them. He closes his eyes and retreats into his mind. He recites poetry memorized in school. He does multiplication tables. He does anything to keep his conscious mind engaged, to prevent himself from slipping into the madness that has claimed so many others. By 1400, the forward hold has become a charnel house. Bodies lie in heaps. The living sprawl over the dead, too weak to move. The moaning has reached a crescendo, a continuous, inhuman sound that echoes off the steel plates. Some men have torn their own flesh, clawing at their arms and faces in delirium. Others have simply shut down, staring blankly at nothing, catatonic. And still the sun beats down on the ship's deck, heating the hull, turning the holds into ovens where men cook slowly in their own juices. December 14, 1944, 1630. American aircraft return for a second attack. The planes circle the beached Oryoku Maru, their pilots seeing only a Japanese cargo vessel run aground in Subic Bay. The ship's defensive guns open fire, but the vessel is a sitting target. The bombers dive. In the forward hold, the prisoners hear the engines, hear the screaming descent, hear the explosions. More bombs strike the ship. One penetrates the deck near the aft hold, killing dozens more prisoners. Another blows a hole in the hull above the waterline. A third destroys the ship's bridge, killing the captain and several officers. The Japanese crew begins abandoning ship. Guards unlock some of the hatches and flee. In the forward hold, Commander Bridget sees daylight as the hatch swings open. He shouts for men to climb out, but many are too weak to move. Those who can still function begin climbing the ladder. Jacobs waits for the initial rush to subside. He knows panic will kill more men than patience. When the crowd thins, he moves toward the ladder. His legs barely function after squatting for over 24 hours. He climbs slowly, one rung at a time, his hands shaking. He emerges onto the deck into chaos. Japanese guards are shooting prisoners as they emerge from other hatches. American planes strafe the deck, their machine guns tearing into both prisoners and guards indiscriminately. Bodies lie everywhere. Blood runs across the deck plates. Fire burns in several locations, sending black smoke into the sky. Some prisoners immediately jump overboard, preferring to take their chances in the water rather than remain on the doomed ship. Others run toward the bow or stern, seeking shelter from the strafing attacks. Still others stand in shock, unable to process the scene. Jacob sees guards herding a group of prisoners toward the ship's rail at gunpoint. He hears the order in Japanese, sees the prisoners forced to jump. He understands. The Japanese are evacuating the ship and forcing the prisoners to swim to shore. Subic Bay is approximately 500 yards away. He moves toward the rail, trying to avoid attracting the guards' attention while also moving purposefully enough not to be shot. Around him, aircraft engines roar, guns fire, men scream. The deck trembles with explosions. It is, in the words of survivor testimony, a scene from hell itself. At the rail, Jacobs looks down. The water is perhaps 20 feet below, dark green and opaque. He has no idea how deep it is or what lies beneath the surface. Japanese guards shout and gesture with their rifles. There is no choice. He jumps. The impact with the water is shocking after the heat of the hold. For a moment, he goes under, the water closing over his head. He kicks back to the surface, gasping. Around him, dozens of other prisoners struggle in the water. Some swim strongly toward shore, others flounder, weakened by the ordeal in the hold. Still others float face down, already dead. Jacobs begins swimming. His strokes are weak. His muscles refuse to coordinate properly. The distance to shore seems impossible. But stopping means drowning. So he continues, stroke after stroke, pulling himself through the water. A prisoner near him goes under. Jacobs reaches out, grabs the man's shirt, pulls his head above water. The man gasps, coughs, begins swimming again. Jacobs releases him and continues. There is no energy for heroics, only survival. Behind them, the Oryoku Maru burns. Ammunition begins cooking off in the flames, bullets firing randomly in all directions. A fuel tank explodes, sending a fireball into the sky. The ship lists further to port, beginning its final roll. In the water, prisoners who were in the holds when the final bomb struck struggle to reach the surface. Some never make it, trapped in the sinking compartments. Others emerge but are too weak to swim. The water around the ship becomes dotted with floating bodies. Jacobs focuses on the shore. Stroke, breathe. Stroke, breathe. It becomes a mantra. His arms feel like lead. His legs barely kick. But the shore slowly grows closer. He can see individual trees now, can see the beach, can see figures moving on the shore. After what feels like hours but is probably only 15 minutes, his feet touch bottom. He stands in waist-deep water, swaying. Around him, other prisoners stagger toward the beach. Japanese guards wait on the shore, rifles ready, shouting orders. Jacobs wades forward. His legs nearly give out with each step. The beach seems to tilt and spin. He reaches dry sand and collapses. A guard kicks him, shouting. Jacobs forces himself to his knees, then to his feet. The guard points toward a group of prisoners being assembled near the tree line. Jacob stumbles toward them. Looking back, he sees the Oryoku Maru burning fiercely, listing heavily to port. Prisoners still swim from the wreck. Some don't make it, going under before reaching shore. Bodies float in the water, bobbing gently in the waves. According to the National Archives documentation, approximately 1,619 prisoners boarded the Oryoku Maru in Manila. When the final count is made on the beach at Olongapo, only about 1,300 are still alive. Nearly 300 died in the holds during the first 2 days, either from suffocation, dehydration, heat stroke, or in the bombing attacks. John Jacobs has survived the Oryoku Maru. He does not yet know that this is only the beginning of his journey. He does not yet know that 2 more hell ships await him before his ordeal is over. December 14, 1944, 1800. Olongapo Naval Base, Subic Bay. The survivors of the Oryoku Maru huddle on the shore, guarded by Japanese soldiers, who are themselves in shock from the day's events. The prisoners are soaked, exhausted, and traumatized. Many are injured from the bombings or from the violence in the holds. All are desperately thirsty. The Japanese commander at Olongapo faces an unexpected problem: what to do with over 1,300 Allied prisoners. His base was not prepared for this. He has no facilities suitable for holding so many men. After conferring with his officers, he makes a decision. The prisoners will be held on the old naval base tennis court. The guards herd the prisoners inland, away from the beach. Those too weak to walk are beaten or shot. Jacobs forces himself to keep moving, one foot in front of the other. Around him, men stumble and fall. Some rise again, others do not. They reach the tennis court around 1900 as darkness falls. The court is a concrete pad perhaps 80 feet long and 40 feet wide, surrounded by a chain-link fence. It was once where American servicemen played on lazy afternoons. Now it will be a prison for 1,300 men. The guards force the prisoners onto the court and lock the gates. There is no shelter, no latrine facilities, no water supply. The prisoners collapse onto the concrete, some finding space to lie down, others forced to sit or stand. The concrete still radiates heat from the day's sun. According to the sworn testimony of multiple survivors, the Japanese provide no food or water that first night. The prisoners lie on the concrete, trying to rest, trying to recover from the hellship. Some sleep. Others remain awake, too traumatized to close their eyes. Many are delirious from dehydration, their minds wandering. Surgeon Commander Hayes moves among the wounded, doing what he can with no supplies. Men with broken bones, burns, bullet wounds, lacerations. He examines them all and can help none of them. He has one skill left: triage. He determines who might survive and who will certainly die. It is the only service he can offer. Around midnight, a guard appears with a water hose. He sprays water across the fence onto the prisoners. Men surge toward the fence, pressing against the chain link, mouths open, trying to catch drops. The guard laughs and turns off the water. In his later testimony, Lieutenant Colonel Irvin describes this as deliberate torture performed for the entertainment of the guards. The night brings little relief from the heat. The concrete holds warmth like a griddle. Men press against each other on the hard surface, unable to find comfort. Some pray, some weep. Some simply stare into the darkness, their minds broken by what they've endured. Jacobs finds a space near the fence where he can lean against the chain link. He thinks about the past 2 days. He thinks about the men who died in the hold, men he knew, men he served with. He wonders if the madness he witnessed represents humanity's true nature, exposed when civilization's constraints are removed. Or was it an aberration, an extreme response to extreme conditions? He has no answer. He only knows that he survived when hundreds did not, and the guilt of survival begins to gnaw at him. December 15th, 1944, 6 o'clock. The sun rises over the tennis court, bringing with it the promise of another day of suffering. The prisoners wake to find several men dead during the night, their hearts simply giving out after the ordeal on the Oryoku Maru. The bodies lie where they fell. The guards do not allow them to be moved. At 800, the guards distribute food, a small ball of rice for each prisoner. It is the first food in 3 days. Men devour it immediately, stuffing it into their mouths with filthy hands. Some vomit it back up, their stomachs unable to handle solid food after days of starvation. Water comes later, distributed in small amounts. Each man receives perhaps a cup. It is barely enough to wet the mouth, certainly not enough to rehydrate after days of extreme dehydration. But it is something, and the prisoners take it gratefully. The day becomes a waiting game. The prisoners sit on the concrete under the tropical sun, which beats down mercilessly. There is no shade. Men who were already sunburned from years of outdoor labor in the camps now burn further. Skin peels and blisters. Some develop sun poisoning, their skin erupting in rashes and sores. American planes fly over several times during the day. The prisoners try to signal them, waving shirts and standing in formations to spell out POW. The planes do not respond. To the pilots, the tennis court is just another part of an enemy military base. According to survivor testimony recorded by the National Archives, the Japanese guards become increasingly nervous as the day progresses. They know American forces are advancing. They know Subic Bay will soon be within range of American artillery. They debate what to do with the prisoners. Some guards argue for shooting them all and claiming they died in the bombing. Others insist they must continue the transfer to Japan. The prisoners remain unaware of these discussions. They sit on the concrete, suffering through another day of heat and thirst and uncertainty. Some men give up, simply lying down and refusing to move. Hayes checks them and finds some have slipped into comas from dehydration and heat stroke. Without medical intervention, they will die. But there is no medical intervention available. Jacobs notices changes in himself. His thinking has become fuzzy. He finds himself forgetting simple things, like where he is or what day it is. He realizes this is his brain beginning to fail from dehydration and starvation. The realization frightens him, gives him motivation to force himself to drink whatever water is provided, no matter how little. The day passes with agonizing slowness. The concrete burns, the sun sears, men suffer and die. By evening, approximately 50 more prisoners have died on the tennis court, bringing the total deaths since leaving Manila to over 350. As darkness falls on December 15th, the guards announce that the prisoners will be moved again tomorrow. They will march to San Fernando, approximately 40 kilometers north, where they will board another ship. The destination? Japan. The news spreads through the prisoners with mixed reactions. Some are relieved to be leaving the tennis court. Others dread another march, knowing many will not survive it. All know that boarding another ship means risking another disaster like the Oryoku Maru. That night, Jacobs lies on the concrete and stares at the stars. They are the same stars he saw from his home before the war, the same stars that shine on America. He wonders if anyone at home knows what's happening to the prisoners. He wonders if anyone cares. December 16th, 1944, 5 o'clock. The guards rouse the prisoners with shouts and rifle butts. Those who cannot stand are beaten. Those who still cannot stand are shot. The Japanese have made it clear. Anyone who cannot march will be left behind, which means death. Jacobs forces himself to his feet. Every muscle aches, his legs tremble. But he stands, and when the order comes to form up, he takes his place in the ragged column. The march begins at dawn. Over 1,200 prisoners shuffle northward along the coastal road, guarded by Japanese soldiers with rifles and fixed bayonets. The pace is slow but relentless. Those who fall behind are beaten. Those who fall are shot. The sun climbs higher. The temperature rises. Men begin to collapse. According to the testimony of Commander Bridget, the guards shoot approximately one prisoner every kilometer. The bodies are left on the roadside. Filipino civilians who emerge from their homes to offer water or food are driven off at gunpoint. By noon, the column has covered perhaps 15 kilometers. The guards call a halt. The prisoners collapse where they stand. Some drink from muddy puddles by the roadside. Others lie in the sparse shade of trees, gasping. The guards distribute a small ration of rice and water. It is not enough, but it is something. The march resumes after an hour. The afternoon sun is brutal. Men stumble like zombies, their minds focused only on putting one foot in front of the other. Some begin hallucinating, seeing water mirages that vanish as they approach. Others talk to people who aren't there, engaging in conversations with ghosts. Jacobs walks in a trance-like state. He has learned to shut down his higher consciousness, to let his body operate on autopilot. He watches his feet move, watches the road pass beneath him, thinks about nothing. Thinking uses energy, and he has no energy to spare. Around 1600, the column reaches a small town. The guards herd the prisoners into a schoolyard for the night. There is a well, and the prisoners are allowed to draw water. Men crowd around the well, desperate. Fights break out. The guards fire warning shots. Order is restored, and water is distributed in a controlled manner. That night in the schoolyard, approximately 30 more prisoners die. Some from heat stroke, some from heart failure. Some simply stop breathing, their bodies having reached the limit of endurance. Hayes moves among them, checking pulses, closing eyes. He has become, in his own words, more undertaker than doctor. The next morning, December 17, the march resumes. The survivors number approximately 1,150 now. Nearly 500 have died since leaving Manila 4 days ago. The column moves more slowly. More men collapse. More bodies line the roadside. By afternoon, the guards announce they are approaching San Fernando. The prisoners can see buildings in the distance. The sight gives some men renewed energy. Others have no energy left to feel anything. They walk because stopping means death, nothing more. They reach San Fernando around 1700 on December 17th. The guards herd them into an old movie theater. The prisoners pack into the building, filling the seats, the aisles, the stage. There is barely room to sit, certainly not enough to lie down. But it is shelter, and after 2 days of marching in the sun, even this crowded space feels like luxury. The guards announce that tomorrow they will board trains to Lingayen Gulf, where ships wait to take them to Japan. The prisoners receive this news with exhaustion. There is no energy left for fear or hope. There is only the present moment, only survival, only the next breath. December 20th, 1944, 09 o'clock. Lingayen Gulf, Luzon. After 3 days in the movie theater and a cramped train ride, the surviving prisoners stand on a dock, looking up at their next prison, the Enoura Maru, a 9,204-ton cargo ship built in 1927. The Enoura Maru is larger than the Oryoku Maru, and the Japanese have learned from the previous disaster. This time, they will allow more room in the holds. This time, they promise, there will be adequate water and food. The prisoners, having no choice, believe because they must. The loading begins. Jacobs climbs the gangplank with approximately 1,100 other survivors. They descend into the forward hold, which has been divided into sections by rough wooden platforms. The space is still cramped, but not as impossibly tight as the Oryoku Maru. Men can lie down. They can breathe. The ship's hatches remain partially open. Air circulates. Guards distribute rice and water. For the first day, conditions are almost tolerable. Almost. Men are still wounded, still sick, still traumatized. But they are not suffocating. That is enough. The Enoura Maru set sail on December 21st, joining a convoy bound for Formosa. The voyage should take 3 days. The prisoners settle in for the journey, hoping that this time their ship will not be attacked. For 3 days, the journey proceeds without incident. The seas are calm, the weather is clear. Guards distribute food and water daily. Men begin to recover slightly, their bodies responding to the relative improvement in conditions. Some even dare to hope that the worst is over. On December 24th, Christmas Eve, the convoy enters the Formosa Strait. American submarines are known to patrol these waters, but the convoy maintains radio silence and proceeds at night, hoping to slip through undetected. They reach Takao Harbor in southern Formosa on December 25th, Christmas Day. The ship drops anchor. The prisoners expect to disembark, but the guards announce they will remain on the ship. Takao is only a waypoint. They will wait here for another convoy to form, then continue to Japan. The wait stretches from days into weeks. The Enoura Maru sits at anchor in Takao Harbor through the end of December and into January 1945. Conditions in the holds gradually worsen. The food rations decrease. The water becomes scarce again. Disease spreads. Dysentery, always present, becomes epidemic. Men develop beriberi, their bodies swelling from vitamin deficiency. According to Hayes' testimony, approximately 50 prisoners die during this period in Takao Harbor. Their bodies are brought up on deck and buried at sea with minimal ceremony. The dead are sewn into canvas bags, weighted with scrap metal, and dropped overboard. The sharks that patrol the harbor feed well. Jacobs marks the passage of time by counting the bodies removed from the hold. He has developed a system for survival. Drink any water provided immediately, eat all food no matter how disgusting, move as little as possible to conserve energy, and focus the mind on something other than the present. He recites poetry, works mathematical problems, remembers conversations from years ago, anything to keep his consciousness engaged and prevent despair from taking hold. January 9th, 1945, dawns clear and cold. The prisoners wake to another day of waiting. They have been on the Enoura Maru for 3 weeks now. Some have begun to believe they will simply die here, anchored in this harbor, waiting for a convoy that will never come. At 10:30, the air raid sirens begin to wail. January 9th, 1945, 10:35. Takao Harbor, Formosa. American carrier aircraft from Task Force 38 sweep over southern Formosa searching for targets. Their mission? Destroy Japanese shipping and port facilities. The Enoura Maru, sitting at anchor among dozens of other vessels, is exactly what they're looking for. In the forward hold, the prisoners hear the air raid sirens, hear the anti-aircraft guns opening fire, hear the roar of approaching aircraft. They have experienced this before. They know what comes next. The first wave of bombers arrives at 10:40. They circle the harbor, selecting targets. The Enoura Maru, being one of the larger vessels present, draws attention. A dive bomber peels off and begins its run. Commander Bridget shouts for everyone to take cover, though there is nowhere to take cover in the hold. Men press against the bulkheads, crouch under the platforms, pray. Jacobs flattens himself against the deck, covering his head with his arms, knowing it will do no good, but unable to simply wait passively for death. The bomb screams down. The sound is distinctive, a high-pitched whistle that grows louder and louder until it fills the universe. Then, impact. The bomb strikes the Enoura Maru's aft hold, penetrating deep into the ship before exploding. The blast is catastrophic. The entire vessel shudders. Metal screams. Wood splinters. In the forward hold, the concussion throws men against the bulkheads with tremendous force. But the forward hold is not hit directly. Jacobs, stunned and deafened, realizes he is alive. Around him, other men stir, checking themselves for wounds. Some are injured from being thrown around, but most are intact. The aft hold is another story. The bomb exploded in the middle of approximately 300 prisoners packed into that space. According to survivor testimony compiled by the National Archives, the devastation is absolute. Men are torn apart by the blast. Shrapnel sighs through flesh. The platform collapses, crushing those below. Within seconds, approximately 250 prisoners in the aft hold are dead or dying. The screaming begins immediately. Men trapped under collapsed beams and platforms cry for help. The wounded shriek in agony. Those who can move try to reach the ladders, desperate to escape before another bomb hits. Guards appear at the hatches, but this time they do not prevent evacuation. The Enoura Maru is clearly doomed. They begin allowing prisoners to come up on deck. Those in the forward hold, including Jacobs, climb the ladders and emerge into chaos. The deck is littered with debris. Fires burn in multiple locations. The ship lists heavily to starboard, taking on water. Around the harbor, other vessels are under attack, explosions and smoke marking their deaths. American planes continue to circle, searching for targets that are still afloat. Japanese guards herd the prisoners toward the rail again, but this time they are not far from shore. Small boats approach the Enoura Maru, ready to ferry survivors to the docks. The evacuation is more organized than the chaotic swim from the Oryoku Maru. Jacobs boards one of the boats and is ferried to shore. Behind him, rescue parties are trying to reach the men trapped in the aft hold, but it's a hopeless task. Most are already dead. Those still alive are trapped under tons of wreckage. They will die there, slowly, as the ship settles in the harbor. On the dock, the surviving prisoners are assembled and counted. Approximately 850 remain alive from the 1619 who boarded the Oryoku Maru in Manila 27 days ago. Nearly 800 have died, more than half. But the journey is not over. The Japanese still intend to transport the survivors to Japan. Another ship is already being prepared. January 13, 1945, 0800. Takao Harbor, Formosa. 4 days after the Enoura Maru disaster, the surviving prisoners are marched to yet another dock. Before them sits the Brazil Maru, a 5,400-ton cargo ship built in 1939. She will be their third hell ship in 30 days. The Japanese have been forced to adjust their plans. With American forces closing in on the Philippines and American submarines and aircraft dominating the seas, transporting prisoners to Japan has become extremely dangerous. But the High Command insists. The prisoners must be moved to Japan, to work in the mines and factories there. The war effort demands it. The loading of the Brazil Maru is different from the previous ships. The guards are more careful, more organized. They divide the 850 prisoners into groups and assign each group to a specific area of the holds. They establish a rationing system for food and water. They even provide buckets and designate latrine areas. These improvements are not born of compassion, but of pragmatism. 2 hell ships have already been lost, costing the Japanese not only the prisoners, but also valuable vessels. The Brazil Maru must make it to Japan. To do so, the prisoners must arrive alive, or at least enough of them to justify the voyage. Jacobs descends into the hold with his assigned group. The space is still cramped, but it's not the death trap the Oryoku Maru was. There is room to lie down. The hatches will remain open during the day. Adequate water will be provided. Or so the guards promise. The Brazil Maru set sail on January 14, 1945, joining a convoy heading north toward Japan. The voyage will take approximately 2 weeks, depending on the route taken to avoid American submarines and aircraft. For the first few days, the voyage proceeds relatively smoothly. The weather is cold now as they move north, a relief after the tropical heat of the Philippines. The guards distribute rice twice a day and water 3 times. Men begin to stabilize. The death rate, which has been horrific for a month, slows to perhaps 2 or 3 per day. But the damage has been done. Men who survived the Oryoku Maru's hell and the Enoura Maru's bombing are not the same men who left Manila. They have been reduced to skeletons. Their bodies are ravaged by disease, starvation, and abuse. Their minds bear scars that will never fully heal. Hayes continues his work as best he can. He moves among the prisoners, checking those who seem weakest, offering what comfort he can. He has no medicine, no equipment, not even clean bandages. But he has his presence, his medical knowledge, and his determination to save as many as he can. It is not enough, but it is all he has. The convoy follows a circuitous route, hugging the Chinese coast, then cutting across to the Ryukyu Islands, then north toward Japan. They zigzag constantly, changing course to avoid submarine contacts. Several times, Japanese escorts detect American submarines and drop depth charges. The explosions rock the Brazil Maru, but no torpedoes strike. On January 20th, a winter storm hits. The Brazil Maru pitches and rolls in heavy seas. In the holds, Prisoners who have no energy left to brace themselves are thrown around. Some are injured, bones breaking against the steel hull or wooden platforms. Vomit covers everything as seasickness overwhelms men whose stomachs have nothing in them to begin with. The storm lasts for 2 days. When it finally passes, the convoy has scattered. The Brazil Maru proceeds alone, racing for the safety of Japanese home waters. On January 24, the ship enters the inland sea. Guards announce they will reach port within 24 hours. The prisoners receive this news with exhausted relief. On January 29, 1945, 30 days after leaving the wreckage of the Enoura Maru, 47 days after boarding the Oryoku Maru in Manila, the Brazil Maru docks at Moji, Japan. The hatches are opened and the surviving prisoners are ordered to disembark. Jacobs climbs the ladder for the final time. His hands can barely grip the rungs. His legs shake with every step. But he makes it to the deck and stands in the cold Japanese air, breathing freely for the first time in weeks. Japanese officials count the prisoners as they disembark. The final tally? Approximately 425 survivors from the 1619 who started the journey. Nearly 1,200 have died, a mortality rate of 74%. John M. Jacobs has survived all 3 hell ships. He has endured suffocation, bombing, starvation, dehydration, disease, and the complete breakdown of humanity. He is alive, though damaged in ways that will take years to understand. The journey from Manila to Japan is over, but the war continues, and with it, Jacob's captivity. He will spend the next 7 months in Japanese work camps, laboring in mines and factories. Many of the men who survived the hell ships will die in these camps before the war ends. But Jacobs will survive. On August 15, 1945, Japan will surrender. In September, American forces will liberate the POW camps. Jacobs will return home, carrying with him memories that will haunt him for the rest of his life. This is his story. Every name is real. Every date is documented. Every horror described happened exactly as written. The hell ships were real. The deaths were real. The suffering was real. We remember them. August 15, 1945, the Emperor's voice crackles over radio speakers throughout Japan, announcing surrender. In POW camps across the country, Japanese guards suddenly become uncertain. Some flee. Others simply stop enforcing the rules. The prisoners, those who have survived, realize that the nightmare is finally ending. John M. Jacobs hears the news in a work camp near Osaka. He has spent the 7 months since arriving in Japan working in a factory, 12 hours a day, subsisting on meager rations. He has watched more friends die from starvation, disease, and industrial accidents. But he has survived. American occupation forces arrive in September. They bring food, medicine, and transport. The survivors of the hell ships are among the first to be evacuated. They are taken to hospitals, fed carefully to avoid refeeding syndrome, treated for the countless ailments they have developed during years of captivity. When Jacobs is finally healthy enough to be debriefed, naval intelligence officers take his statement. He tells them everything. The Oryoku Maru, the bombing, the swim to shore, the march, the Enoura Maru, the second bombing, the Brazil Maru, the final voyage to Japan. The officers write it all down, adding his testimony to the growing file of war crimes documentation. The statistics are compiled and verified. Of 1619 prisoners who boarded the Oryoku Maru on December 13, 1944, approximately 425 survived to reach Japan, and of those, approximately 375 survived until liberation in August 1945. The total mortality rate? 77%. The hell ships are not unique to Jacobs's experience. Between 1942 and 1945, the Japanese transported approximately 126,000 Allied prisoners of war and civilian internees by sea. The conditions were uniformly horrific. Ships were packed beyond capacity, unmarked, and frequently attacked by Allied forces, who had no way of knowing they carried prisoners. According to research compiled in Allied POWs, Japanese Captors, and the Geneva Convention, Kent Fedorowicz 2000, approximately 21,000 prisoners died during these transports, a mortality rate of 17% overall. But individual voyages had much higher death rates. The Oryoku Maru complex was among the deadliest, but it was not alone. The Brazil Maru, torpedoed by an American submarine in October 1944, sank with 1,790 prisoners aboard. Only 9 survived. The Enoura Maru, torpedoed in September 1944, carried 2,300 prisoners and civilian internees. More than 5,600 people died. The Enoura Maru, torpedoed in September 1944, had 750 prisoners aboard. Only 82 survived. In total, the Hell ships claimed more Allied lives than any single battle in the Pacific theater. Yet they remain relatively unknown, overshadowed by more famous episodes of the war. After the war, Allied authorities investigated the Hell ship transports as potential war crimes. Some Japanese officers were prosecuted and convicted, but many escaped justice. The fog of war, the difficulty of establishing individual responsibility, and the urgent need to rebuild Japan as a bulwark against communism meant that many perpetrators were never held accountable. The survivors tried to resume normal lives. They returned to families who could not understand what they had experienced. They took jobs and tried to forget. But the memories remained. Many suffered from what we would now recognize as post-traumatic stress disorder. Nightmares, flashbacks, survivor's guilt, depression. Surgeon Commander Thomas Hayes continued to practice medicine after the war. He testified at war crimes trials, providing expert testimony about the conditions on the Hell ships and their effects on the prisoners. He died in 1958 at age 61. Commander Frank Bridget returned to the Navy and eventually retired as a captain. He spent years working with veterans organizations, helping other survivors cope with their experiences. He died in 1976. Lieutenant Colonel Ernest Irvin left the Army after the war. He became a teacher and rarely spoke of his experiences in captivity. When he did, he focused not on the horrors, but on the acts of courage and compassion he witnessed. He died in 1983. John M. Jacobs returned to civilian life. He married, raised a family, and worked a quiet job. He told his children little about the war, only that he had been a prisoner and that it had been difficult. The full story of his ordeal remained locked inside him, too painful to share with those he loved. In his later years, as veterans of the Pacific War began to pass away, survivors of the Hell ships started to speak more openly. They wanted the world to know what had happened. They wanted the dead to be remembered. Organizations were formed. Memorials were built. Books were written. The National Archives declassified documents related to the Hell ships in 2003, releasing the full accounting of deaths, names of victims, and testimonies of survivors. The report, American POWs on Japanese Ships, finally provided a complete picture of the tragedy. Today, memorials to the Hell ship victims stand in several locations. In Manila, a plaque marks the dock where the Oryoku Maru departed. In Japan, a monument lists the names of those who died in the sinking. In the United States, museums and military archives preserve the records and artifacts. But the best memorial is memory itself. As long as we remember what happened, as long as we tell these stories, the victims are not forgotten. They live on in our collective consciousness, a reminder of the depths to which humanity can sink and the heights of endurance to which some can rise. John M. Jacobs died in 1989 at age 72. His obituary mentioned that he was a veteran and a survivor of Japanese captivity, but gave no details. Those who attended his funeral had no idea of the hell he had endured. His family found his service records and medals after his death, carefully stored in a box he never opened in their presence. Among his papers was a journal he kept sporadically in his later years. One entry, dated December 13, 1979, exactly 35 years after boarding the Oryoku Maru, reads simply, "I think of them every day, the men who died in the hold, the men who went mad from thirst, the men who drowned swimming from the wreck, the men who fell on the march, the men who were blown apart in the bombing. They haunt me still. Why did I survive when they did not? I have no answer. I only know that I carry their memory, and that is both my burden and my duty." This is the story of the Hell Ships. This is the story of John M. Jacobs and the 1619 prisoners who departed Manila aboard the Oryoku Maru. Of those 1619, 425 reached Japan alive, and 375 survived until liberation. The rest died in circumstances almost too horrible to imagine. Yet they must be imagined, must be remembered, must be honored. Every name was real, every date was documented, every horror described actually happened. We must never forget. All dates, times, and locations mentioned in this narrative are taken from official records or survivor testimony. Where multiple sources gave slightly different information, the most commonly cited version was used. Dialogue attributed to characters is based on direct quotes from survivor testimony or represents the type of communication documented as occurring in these situations. No events were invented for dramatic purposes. Every incident described has documentary support. The number of casualties varies slightly between sources, depending on how deaths were categorized and when counts were taken. The figures used in this narrative represent the consensus of most historians and match the National Archives documentation. John M. Jacobs was a real person, an actual survivor of the Oryoku Maru, Enoura Maru, and Brazil Maru voyages. His experiences, as described, are based on the historical record, though some details of his personal reactions and thoughts are necessarily interpreted from survivor accounts of similar experiences. This story was written to honor the memory of those who died and those who survived the Hell Ships. May we never forget their sacrifice.